So today's video, what I want to go over is a continuation from the last video in this series, really focusing on how much food you should really be eating. This is going to be a kind of quick guide onto calories and how calories in versus calories out relate to weight management, whether it comes to losing weight, gaining weight, or maintaining the level of weight that you feel you're best at. So, quick preview on what you guys are going to be hearing in this video. I'm going to be really going over what are calories, what is the understanding of it, and so that you can go about and use that information to help you make healthier and smarter nutritional decisions to help your current goals. Going to go into a little more about what are calories in versus calories out, why that matters, and why that's kind of like the basis between any kind of weight management program, strategy, or anything that comes, within that scope. And lastly, how can you manipulate these things to go ahead and reach your body weight goals? To go over, what are the general guidelines of calories that you should be eating for different types of goals, but also go into a little bit more about how to manipulate that in a way that's going to give you the most bang for your buck. So I'm sure you might be wondering, why do you even care? Why should you care about something like this? I'm sure there's a lot of other things you could be doing, but maybe you're sitting in the car as you're driving home, or you're just lounging around the house. But either way, one of the biggest reasons why I believe a lot of people should kind of care more about this kind of stuff, is with this kind of information, you'll be able to improve your ability to take control of your nutrition, so you can finally become that healthiest version of yourself. There's a lot of contradictory and confusing information that exists in the nutritional space. So my hope and my goal with this type of talk video here is to kind of dwindle that down, and it's something that's realistic, something that's understandable, and provide you with things that you can do immediately so you can start moving forward towards, that healthiest version of you. So ultimately, what I'm going to show you today is what matters most for your weight management, and making sure that you have a better idea and are better able to determine what you should be eating, or more so, how much you should be eating, in order to determine what's going to best help you lose weight, stay at the same weight, maintain a weight, or just feel better and just feel like you're in more control of your nutrition. And then we're also going to cover a few things on how to change your kind of equation of calories in, calories out, so you're going to be putting yourself in the best position to do either one of those goals that you want to do for yourself. These 2 points on the slide here might resonate with you. So this might be perfect way to describe some of the things that you may be feeling when you go about trying to figure out what you should be doing from a nutrition standpoint. For a lot of people, nutrition seems very, very confusing. There's a lot of information out there that goes back and forth, and they kind of contradict one another, which ultimately leaves people feeling paralyzed, more confused than ever, not sure about what they should be doing. They hear one day, you should only be eating meat, then you should only be eating plants, then you should only be having breaths of air every 20 minutes to go about and get all the nutrition that you need. Obviously, I'm joking there, but you get the point, where there's a lot of confusing, conflicting information that exists. And in my experience, all of this information, based on the dozens of clients that I've been or worked with and helped, have figured out that they ultimately feel so paralyzed and stuck that they end up not doing anything at all. So my hope for you is that with this information you're going to hear today, is you can kind of get ahead of that and figure out and start making some actionable steps so you can improve your nutrition and ultimately your health. So in case you're new to who I am, here's a quick overview. I've been doing this for about 5 years now. I teach college course, strength and conditioning at William Patterson University. I hold a master's in exercise science. I've worked with clients and I've helped them drop 10, 15, and even 40 plus pounds, through very different means and very, very different methods and different types of personality, schedules, interests, and fitness and nutrition confidence levels. And I think that's something for me that stands out the most, because through my experiences, I've learned, what are the real struggles that people have. And ultimately, I've come to the realization that it's less about information and it's more about implementation, to figure out how can you start applying these things to people's routine to help them feel more consistent, more sustainable with their nutrition, and more confident that they have the ability to actually do the things that they've set out for themselves to do. When we're trying to manipulate or change or do anything which related to our body weight, body fat, body composition, meaning the relative body skeletal muscle and body fat that we have, it all comes down to thermodynamics, which is a fancy term. And in simple terms, it kind of brings us down to this energy balance equation. And this energy balance equation is related to calories in versus calories out. So for example, calories in is going to be from the food that you eat. Calories out is going to be that the energy or the calories that you burn on a day-to-day basis. And the reason why we say the word energy and use this when we talk about calories is because calories is just a measure of energy, which we'll go over a little bit more in the next slide. The biggest contributor to calories in is going to be our food. Calories, as more of a definition, is, calories equal, or a calorie by definition is ultimately the amount of energy needed to raise the temperature of water by 1 degree. And the food that we eat on a day-to-day basis contains calories and contains that energy. So when we're talking about calories, we're talking about energy, and especially when it comes to calories in, we're talking about utilizing the calories and the energy that's from food and using that for our body to do what it needs to do. And that could range from moving around, that could range from doing all of the biochemical and metabolic reactions that are taking place, and anything and everything in between. And that energy that we use comes from calories from the food that we eat. The calories in, calories out equation and theory, has been challenged in the past, but more times than not, available information and evidence and research does point to this balance of being the most important thing for overall body weight management. So, long story short, this might be familiar to you, but if you eat more calories than you burn, you will gain weight. If you eat the same number of calories that you are burning, your weight will stay the same. However, if you burn more calories than you are eating or taking in, then you ultimately lose weight. So one way I like to think about this, right, aside from just that kind of scale that's moving up and down, is almost like a warehouse. If you imagine like a supply chain sort of thing, with the warehouse being our body, we have storage boxes or storage units that are coming into the warehouse, and when they are needed and when they are ready to be distributed, they empty that warehouse. So we're going to think of the warehouse as our body, our storage boxes coming in as food or calories, and then as they exit, then those calories are going to be shipped off to be used and burned for energy. So if I have my warehouse, I have a lot of storage units coming in, they're going to quickly fill up, fill up, fill up, fill up, fill up. There's going to be more storage units in that warehouse. So if we think of our body, that could be the same kind of as increasing our body mass, increasing our body weight. If we want to use that energy, we want to reduce the size, the amount of boxes in our warehouse, or if we want to lose weight, we have to empty those boxes out somewhere. And when we do things like exercise, when we do things, which I'll go over in the next little section here, but we exercise, we move around a lot, then we're going to be needing to utilize that stored energy and ship it off to be used so we can do the things that we need to do. So it's kind of this cycle of calories or boxes coming into the warehouse. As I need them and as I use that energy, then they empty out and they go off to be utilized for any type of body system, body tasks, or exercise sort of thing. So that analogy might make sense, it might not, but ultimately, if you're trying to figure out, okay, what should you be doing to gain weight, stay the same weight, or lose weight, it does come down to these calories in, calories out, and this might make it a little bit more clear for you to determine what matters most. So when we're looking at our calories out, we've gone over kind of our calories in and how that plays a role. And when we're talking about how to increase the amount of calories we're burning, so how do we increase the rate of those boxes and calories and energy being utilized within our body, here are the main 4 things that contribute to that. So this is from a research paper on the bottom there underneath the graph and that image. But ultimately, it comes down to these 4 things. You have your resting and basal metabolic rate, which is the amount of energy and calories you're burning while you're not doing anything. You're kind of just sitting down. You are resting. You might just be watching TV, or you might just be taking a nap. But this is the amount of exercise, the amount of calories needed to basically keep you alive. We also have something called our thermic effective food, which is the amount of calories and energy that it takes to digest certain types of macronutrients, with those macronutrients being carbohydrates, proteins, and fats. And each one of those has a different percentage of how much thermic effect of food there is. We also have our non-exercise activity thermogenesis, which is also just called NEAT. And this is just the overall activity that you do throughout the day. So this would be something where you hear a lot of fitness professionals like myself talk about, increasing your step count, getting more activity, getting those steps in, finding time to, walk the dog a little bit more, or walk on the phone, or do more chores, around the house, or do something to keep you more active and throughout the day. Standing at the walking or standing while you're at work. These are just a list of things, but ultimately these are things within your day-to-day routine that keep you moving, keep you active, but don't necessarily require, dedicated 30, 40, or 60-minute exercise. And then lastly, we have that exercise activity thermogenesis, or EAT, which is the honestly smallest portion of that calories out calories out order, which I find interesting because everybody always talks about exercise, 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 but in reality, it contributes very little in the big picture. And the biggest things that are really going to contribute are your resting and basal metabolic rate and your non-exercise activity. So these are what's going to contribute to calories out. And next up, we'll go over a little bit more one by one. How you can do things to improve this calories out equation. So we talked about what contributes to those calories out, but now let's look at how we can increase that. So for our NEAT, remember that's our non-exercise activity thermogenesis. This is something that you have a pretty decent control of. This is going to be related to how many steps you're getting throughout the day, how frequently you're standing and moving around, simple things that you can do. I always try to remind people, don't reinvent the wheel. Don't try to do anything crazy, especially if all this is new for you. But try to think about, okay, how can I just do a little bit more with what I currently have going on? So for example, if you're doing a lot of chores on a Saturday or Sunday afternoon, go ahead and maybe do something that is going to have you park farther away from the store. Take the stairs. Maybe take the long way to the aisle that you're trying to get to. This way, you're not having to dedicate extra time afterwards for your already busy life. Other ways you can do this is going to be talking on the phone while you're walking, standing desk, pedaling desk. My dad loves that bike desk thing that he has, and it's helped him tremendously. But ultimately, when it comes to your non-exercise activity, you're just looking to do more steps and be more active throughout the day. Other thing we can do is kind of increase our resting and basal metabolic rate. And some of this is going to be, or a portion of this is predominantly going to be related to genetics, overall health status. For example, if you have any thyroid dysfunction, that's going to, definitely have an impact on your ability to maintain a certain level of resting metabolic rate. But one of the ways that we can keep a metabolic rate more active is by having more skeletal muscle. So this is why resistance training and strength training becomes very, very important. This is where we're also going to kind of talk briefly about the exercise activity thermogenesis, and making sure that there are maybe anywhere from 2 to 4 days that you're doing that targeted exercise. That could be strength training, that could be cardio training, that could be jogging, walking, could be lifting weights, taking a group spin class. Whatever it is that at first is going to get you excited, motivated, and going to keep you consistently showing up. That's going to be more important if you're starting out with this for the very first time. My recommendation is to make sure you're doing a mix of both. So you're doing the cardio stuff for your overall health and fitness, but also you're not neglecting the muscle side of it, because that's going to have a huge impact on quality of life and that resting metabolic rate as well. And then we also have our thermic effect of food. So these percentages here between the protein, carbs, and fats is the percentage of energy or the percentage of contribution to that thermic effect of food from these sources. So for example, the protein is going to have the highest thermic effect of food, then carbohydrates, and then fats. So oftentimes you hear people talk about high protein diets for weight loss, and though it's not going to make or break your overall caloric expenditure and how much energy you're burning, it's going to be something that can help you prioritize eating more whole foods, getting that high quality protein to support your muscles, but to also provide that just little added benefit of knowing that you're doing, getting the best bang for your buck when it comes to protein, because you have all those benefits there. And lastly, just more whole foods in general are going to prioritize and take more effort and energy for your body to digest, as opposed to the more processed foods. This has to do with breaking down the foods themselves, chewing, the energy to absorb it, break it down, and then utilize it. So in the lecture, or not the lecture, sounds too formal, but in the video I did before, we went over the whole foods, so definitely check that one out. I'll link it here if I can, because that's going to be a big help too to figure out why those whole foods are so important to prioritize and to build your nutrition program around. So you might be thinking at this point, Tim, if you were telling us about calories and how many calories you should be eating, why didn't you give us this in the beginning of the video? And I would say, good question. But if I did that, then you might not have learned all the other stuff we just covered and had a better understanding of how this stuff really works and how you can apply it to actually, make these numbers mean something a little bit more and make it easier for you to actually, hit these numbers. So for example, if your goal is just overall weight loss, you're at a point where you just want to lose weight, maybe not feeling as best as you could, maybe you have a dress you want to get into, a suit, a wedding, a family event coming up, something where you want to, start chipping away at some weight loss goals. Take that goal body weight and multiply that by 12. So for example, if I was 180 pounds and I want to go down to 170, I gotta pull my calculator out, I'm not that good at math still, but I'm gonna take my 170, multiply that by 12. That's going to put me at 2040. We'll say about 2000 calories, give or take there. If I wanted to keep my weight the same, I'm going to take my current body weight, so I would take my 180, and then I would multiply that by either 12 or 18. Now you see the difference here is that there's a range with these. So with these ranges, this is going to be related to your activity levels. If you're someone who feels that they're on more of a sedentary and maybe not as active, then you might be on the closer to that 12, 13 range. If you're someone who's maybe very active, working out 4 to 6 days per week, regularly training at an appropriate intensity, maybe you can be at that 16 to 18 range. So what we'll do for this example is we'll put it at right in the middle. We'll go 15. So I'm going to take my body weight, 180, multiply that by 15, and that's going to put me at about 2,700. Now remember, this is for someone who is very active. So those numbers might be skewed. To put it in comparison, if someone is at 180 and then they're going to be maybe not as active, maybe we'll multiply it by 12. Then that's going to put us closer to it's going to be 2,160 calories, which is a little bit closer to that 2,000 calories that we talked about for that original goal body weight times 12. So on the flip side, Airflow goal was to gain weight. Let's say I want to gain 5 pounds of muscle. I want to have a little bit more protein in there. So I'm going to up my calories slightly. So I'll take that 180. I'm going to multiply that by 14. And that's going to put me at 2,520 calories. Again, if you're someone who's very active, gaining weight, or it would be require more calories because you're more active. So use the higher end of those numbers. Also, if it's easier, use those online calorie calculators. They could be very helpful and very beneficial and make it easier for you. But one thing to stress with this is you're going to be able to know what works best for you and your body. I would say start at a point that's in the middle, and then adjust from there. This way you can decide, okay, am I losing weight at a rate that I'm comfortable with and I feel like I can sustain, or do I feel like I'm starving myself and maybe I need to add a little more calories in so I can actually sustain this and sustain enough energy for my workouts and not feel like I'm, going to cave and crash and revert back to that yo-yo pattern of dieting that you may have experienced in the past. So the role of macronutrients in all of this is going to require its own video, and that's going to come out next. But ultimately, the three main macronutrients that we want to be just thinking about now are going to be protein, carbs, and fats. And the term macronutrients comes because we need these nutrients in large quantities. Think macro, large, nutrients, what these things are. So we break the food that we eat because we eat food together in full scope, a full profile of vitamins, minerals, and nutrients, which is why those whole foods again are super important. But we eat the food at its complete parts, and then we break that food down into the parts that make up that food, which oftentimes are protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So taking an example of something in that image here, let's use the whole grain bread. We eat whole grain bread, predominantly carbohydrates and some protein in there. So when we eat that, we're going to break that down as we chew it. We break it down, we digest it, and at the end of it, we're going to be left with a portion of proteins and carbohydrates that our body can utilize. Same thing with like avocado or nuts. We have some nuts. Nuts are going to be a good source of fat and a little bit of protein. So when we eat those nuts after we've gone through our digestion process, we'll be left with protein and fats that our body can use for any kind of process that it needs to. When we get into calories for these things, you'll see that protein and carbohydrates contain 4 calories per gram. Protein being great for building muscle, making certain kinds of hormones and enzymes and neurotransmitters and a lot of other sciencey stuff. Carbohydrates, their main role is, aside from being 4 calories per gram, is going to be used for very high intensity exercise. So think about like your sprints. Think about your exercise where your heart rate is, feel like it's about to burst out of your chest. That type of exercise is really useful for having carbohydrates. It's also going to be a steady supply of energy for the brain, making sure our muscles have enough energy to do things when they're called upon. And a bunch of other stuff as well. Fats contain 9 calories per gram, and they're going to be beneficial for overall health, for overall cell health, going to be helpful for hormone production, for maintaining certain levels of balance within the body, and also supply a very large amount of calories and energy. As you can see, 9 calories per gram. So fats are going to provide the biggest energy. However, they're going to be more suited for exercise that is going to be less intense than the exercise for carbohydrates. Although there's some evidence out there that's now saying that it's fats can provide a little bit more energy than we thought at those higher levels of workout. So just a little tidbit there. But ultimately, for our macronutrients, for as it pertains to this, here's kind of a preview of what's coming in the next video. So to recap all this up, ultimately, any kind of manipulation or change to body weight and body overall composition is going to come down in some way, shape, or form to calories in, being the amount of food that we're having and the calories we're taking in from that food, and the calories out. And that is going to be determined by the energy we're using throughout the day and largely determined by our metabolic rate, our activity or exercise, and other overall health status as well. The good news with this stuff is you can control both of these. A lot of these things, aside from those individuals that have medically diagnosed conditions such as thyroid dysregulation or anything related to that, you'll have the opportunity to manipulate and find ways to incorporate more of these things into your day-to-day routine. Incorporating foods that are whole foods, minimally processed, prioritizing things like protein, fruits and vegetables. From an activity standpoint, finding time where you can maybe get a couple more steps, or talk to someone while you're walking, do some work of that while you're walking, or cycling or standing or something, just to keep your body more active throughout the day. And that's a good sign, because I think a lot of people miss this both. They do think that just because there's information out there, it's going to fix everything. But unfortunately, at the end of the day, there does has to be action that needs to take place on your end in order to start making these changes happen. But the good news is you can start with that at a pace that fits for you, and one that you can feel that you're going to be sustainable and consistent with. Now, if you want more guidance, if you want more helpful tips, tricks, suggestions, or if you want to learn more about how I can help guide you through this whole process, here's where you can find more from me. My website is located there, email as well, Instagram. And if you are interested in more in-person personal training, I'm available in Fairfield, New Jersey. And I'll provide more information down below, as well as some access to some free resources as well. So keep your eyes and ears out for the next video, where we're going to be looking more in depth at those macronutrients.